At least
Hi.
you are a director. You're a born director. That's what you are. Maybe even a producer. Yeah, so basically, I made the circular because problems don't finish. You go around and around. So I had problem finding as number one, and I had innovation, doing it, action, doing it. Because if you don't do it, there is no innovation. And I had plan in there, which was missing. So anyway, I start becoming known around the company as this guy who can help you solve problems. And little by little, I could see that my career was more like me helping people solve problems than trying to fit into the company hierarchy of managing problems. And my boss said, you'll be promoted to your boss's job next year. I said, would I really like to do his job?
Probably not.
Yeah. So he said, would you rather work on other people's problems? That's not. Yeah. I said, yes, I would. So they let me go to a new division downtown called Management Systems, and their job was to bring in change, but it was mostly computers. It was the age of the computers, and I was the guy who could make change other than computers and stuff like that. And
Right.
I began to get a lot of invitations from manufacturing plants and sales plants who would ask me to come in and help them do this or do that. And I began to smell an opportunity. We had a University of Cincinnati locally, and I got myself entered into the PhD program. And they took me in as a part-time student, which they hardly ever do. But because I was from Procter and Gamble, that meant something. They could these are the two big things in town. So now I enter in and I take voluminous courses. We had to take courses in economic this and that. Well, it was enormous, and you had to do that. So for 3 years, I'm slugging my way through mostly nighttime classes and inventing excuses when I could do a noon hour. And now I end up needing. I've got everything done, and I need a research topic. When you do a PhD, you've got to figure out what's new that you can do that nobody else can do.
Right.
Now, it took me a long time to figure it out, but I looked at all the things I had learned and all the research I'd read, and most of the research was not that good. It was all about brainstorming, do groups work, etc. But I said, you know what? What I discovered was unless you're training, if you train people, unless you train them thoroughly, effectively, so you actually make an impact on their ability to defer judgment and the ability to prefer ideation, it isn't going to work. I know that. It seems like nobody else does because people are saying, well, so-and-so in England tried a 1 hour thing and nothing happened. Well, you can't do anything in 1 hour. So I get that as my research topic. I talked with a fellow named George Grain, who was a new chairman who had a huge reputation. And I timidly went up to him and said, would you be my dissertation chairman? I figured you got to do it sooner or later. You got to pen. George said, okay. Now, most people have been here for 3 or 4 years and they've learned how to do research. You're a part-timer. You don't know how to do research. So you have to do two things. Learn how to do research at the same time as you do research. And I said, George, my implementer came up. George, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I will do whatever it takes. And very fortunately, I developed a dissertation, and I did it on a company project with company engineers, randomly assigned these guys know all that kind of stuff. And I ended up with an award-winning dissertation because I learned how to do it.
Right.
So from scratch. And there were no, if you're doing creativity, there's no things you can pull off the shelf. You had to invent. I had to invent the things. It was wonderful. And so now I've done that, and I've been at this like 7 years, I guess. And you're doing. What do you do now? Well, McMaster University in Hamilton, in Canada, sends a guy down, and he says, we got an idea. We're trying to introduce organizational behavior. It's a brand new subject, and that's what I had. And we'd like you to come back. And I said, here's my fork in the road. And I did everything I could do to keep them both. I went to my company. I said, could you let me out 1 day a week and in 4 days? And he said, look, if we do that for you, we got to do it for everybody. So
Yeah.
So finally, with real difficulty, I had so many contacts and so much, I built such a reputation. Am I going to go back to this place called Canada, which 14 years ago, and I don't really know if I like teaching. I don't know. But I ended up figuring it's the best thing to do. So we wrapped up and we went to Canada. And what happened? This your next question was, did you when Sid said this guy from Canada kept on coming down, had to convince his people? Well, I was the guy, and I
When you
came down
started
every
describing-
opportunity I could to work with Sid. He was in Buffalo, and I was just
Yeah.
So I would come down, but my area, which was the management area, they couldn't understand why would you do problem solving. This is 1982. What
Right.
are you doing? Why don't you do the? And I said, well, for me, I said, listen, for me, problem solving is the root of everything. If you think of learning how to problem solve, you can do any of these standard courses you're doing. Innovation, that was hardly ever even mentioned. That was some, we had the Opera Research guy say, oh, we do innovation, we do all that. So I now am doing stuff, and so I had to go to get my, what's the first thing to become an associate? You got to join the faculty. You got to, that bit one. And I did enough. I did I turned my dissertation in. I did 3 really good high level publications, which I have George Grain help me a lot. And I passed the test. And then later, when I became, you go up to become a full faculty, a full professor, I was in real luck. Our new dean who had come in had been pressured by his alumni that maybe you got to be more outgoing, doing real things. So he came to me and he said, look, for the first time, what I want you to do, I want you to write to all of your clients, the big ones. And I want them to write back, what did you do that helped? Don't say you're a nice guy. Yeah. And I want that. So he ended up, I did. And I got the support from the area. I'd written books, I'd done stuff. And they got me. And the whole idea was for the first time, this guy's going up because he can make change. He can do things. See? And so I got it. I got it not easily, but I worked my way through. Whenever we had a faculty member who didn't like me, we would end up waiting to him to take vacation before we would do our next thing. So we worked our way through. So problem solving was everything. Okay, so with Sid, I spent the next many years going with him, going over to help him out. We would go. He had a Winterfest. He had he wanted to go to. He wanted to go to San Diego and retire there. So he went out ahead and he started to do the institute that he was doing out there. Well, I would find reasons to get out there. I would go. I would make every trip I made anywhere a research possibility. So if I was helping a company figure this problem out, I would invent an experiment we could do and I could write about it. So one of the problems that kids have today, if they're doing it like early days, they want to become a faculty member. Most of them don't have anything to work with.
Right.
If they have to spend the first year to find some kind of direction. I was lucky. I had my direction already.
Right.
And so I did it already. And the biggest thing for me is learning by experience. You don't really understand until you experiment.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in engineering physics, I used to draw pictures for myself while the professor was talking. Anything I could write, it was doing something to make it rather than just listening theoretically. And in engineering, what you did, problem solving was simply coming up with the right answer to a question that you were given. And that's not the real world. You never are given the right answer, a problem to do. So anyway, I'm somewhere on where you are, and maybe I should turn it over to you if you
No.
if you got a question for me.
No, this going through this, we can go in any order, but what I'm hearing from you that's most interesting is that every challenge, or I guess approach that you went through personally, I think you were able to do really well because everything that you've done has been more non-traditional. There wasn't a path laid out for you, but I think because of that and because those early days of I mean, almost instantly coming up with challenges, whether that was connecting or communicating or maybe cultural challenges, it also allowed you to learn empathy. And when you can empathize with people and understand what their challenge is and how to build those bridges,
That
you can
is
become somebody
that, that
who
is
can
everything.
solve problems.
In your last paragraph there about Seth Godin and the Stoics,
Mhm.
it's everything. Is when empathy is you,
Right.
no problem is worth anything unless there's an owner. Somebody's got to
Yeah.
own the problem. That is so fundamental. If you don't have an owner, you don't have a problem. So the
Right.
first thing is you have to have someone who needs help. We have these what do they call them? Innovation centers all over the place by the government. They're useless because kids come in with an idea and then they teach them.
Right.
But what? Whose problem is this? They don't know. So in the wheel, if you have an idea, you work way backwards. Which what problem are you going to solve? Yeah, and they don't know how to do that. And so anyway, the key is unless you have a client, forget it. And the next thing is if you really do have someone who has a need. You don't say, "Well, I'm doing this because people are sleeping in the subways, and our city council thought we should look at it." Who are you helping? Who
Yeah.
on city council is going to do something with this? And that's what the design thinking a lot is fairly useless because they put people to work on somebody else's problem. So a big one is who can you help? Who can you help? Who needs you? And then you've got to say, okay, who can help us? And you've
Yeah.
got to I call it getting the right people in the room. You've
Mhm.
got to get them in the room. Who can help you? And you think about it, what knowledge do we need? Now, with the internet here, you can get a lot of people because they're everywhere, but you can get them all together. But what do you need to know? What knowledge do you need? Well, once you have the right people, quote unquote, in the room, then you need a process. You need a process to follow that helps you make change, solve problems. See, making change for me is just problem solving, but making change means you find the problem first, and the only way you can distinguish yourself, and this is going back to what Steph Godin wrote. You've got to be different. The only way you can get ahead in a company is you've got to be a good problem finder, find problems that nobody else wants to solve, and you come up, you take the risk of being a leader because you're going to I'm going to do something different. So we have a process that is fundamentally perfect. I've been using my whole life, that 8-step process. And I was just going to connect it to something else. Oh, my name. So I'm stuck with this funny name, Marino. See? And they make fun of the name all the way through. And I said, I got to get rid of this name. So anyway, I was a great underdog like her. And I love baseball. I learned how to play baseball. I played it a long time as a kid. And I learned that there was a team called the New York Yankees that was winning continually, and they won every. Now, that is awfully boring. They keep on winning, and second of all, they have more money than anybody, so they buy the best players. So why would I root for? I became a Yankee hater, and so I had to find somebody else. And there was a young guy who had come up from Cuba, first one in history for the White Sox, and his name was Orestes Minoso. So they named him Minnie Minoso. And I encouraged the use of Minnie, and that's how Min came from. By the time I was well into high school, they were calling me Min Bassler, and that's where it came from. Even that was difficult, but it got solved. It got solved.
Right.
Yeah. Um, oops.
So one of the things that you've talked about a few times is, and some things that I've read in some of your work, is that really critical first step of articulating your challenge and kicking off your process by being able to be very specific about what you're not necessarily what you're trying to solve, but how you describe what that challenge is, which goes into making sure you have the right people in the room with those experiences. So one of the the last meeting that I facilitated in September was so the institute that I work with works a lot with the Department of Defense and the natural resources kind of program that they lead. And that just means that everywhere that they have a military installation, they have also, by default, protected hundreds of thousands of acres that then become wildlife habitat, protected area that's not developed, and usually it ends up being this haven for endangered species. So the DoD has this natural resource program, and they have funding from the Sykes Act that tells them kind of vaguely how they should be taking care of that land and the resources that they have. And the challenge that they have a lot of the time is that none of the services, the military branches, talk to each other, and they all
Yeah.
have different different ways of
Very,
communicating. Yeah.
yeah, very
So
familiar.
yeah. So the program, the natural resources program, and some of the people who kind of represent that program were able to come together for the first time across branches in September and talk about some of those challenges. And the hardest part of facilitating that meeting was trying to help them not jump to what's the best solution, but instead to make sure that they could articulate and be very specific about what their actual problem was. Is it
Exactly.
that, for some of them, it was, some of the things were as specific as the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and treaty kind of created complications for people in the Air Force and their training, but they couldn't articulate very quickly what some of those challenges were. So that was probably one of the biggest facilitated meetings of my career, but I was able to use some of the steps from the model that you built and in conjunction with there's an author, E.J. Davidson, who wrote evaluation methodologies or wrote about them. And his methods, they were written after some of your work, but to me, it seems like he drew on a lot of the things that you had built because his very first step in his methodology is about articulating what those challenges are.
Yeah.
And it's a skill set. It is something that you almost have to be an implementer to be able to understand where the break in the bridge is from point A to the actual solution. I
Yeah,
really appreciate that part of your work.
yeah. So that's the first three steps in the process are problem finding. And we call that fuzzy situation. Got
Yeah.
fact finding,
Mhm.
diverge on the facts, converge on the key facts, and then comes problem definition, and that's where you are. And
Right.
the problem definition is very hard for most people because they want to be implementing. But problem definition is key, and we have staked. I guess our claim to fame is probably more like problem definition. We convert the key facts into challenges called how might we. So we invented the term how might we. It's all over the place. Actually, I learned it from Sid, who had it admired somewhere, and I popularized how might we everywhere. So you turn them into a challenge called how might we this, how might we that, how might we this. And then you converge again. See, it's a diverging and converging, diverging and converging. They converge on the most critical how might we's. How might we protect the birds over here? How might we make sure this happens over there? Now you take that and you start something called challenge mapping. And one of the article, this is really tremendous, useful. If you take that challenge and you put it in the middle of a space, you ask two questions. Why might I want to? Why else might I want to? Why else might I want to? And what's stopping me from? What's stopping me from? What's stopping me from? And those invent new challenges, which are more strategic and more narrow. And as by doing this mapping, you end up with, if you keep on doing it, you'll end up with 30 or 40 challenges with the most strategic at the top and the most narrow at the bottom. But everybody agrees with that entire map. So if I think I'm doing this, I can see where I fit doing that. And if I work with a city council or not city people, the guy who thinks we should improve the subway over here finds out that this guy over here who wants to cure homelessness, we're all on the same page. We're just interrelated with each other, and you can see the whole problem. And
Right.
that's the most important thing to do. So everybody says, I see where I fit on here. I'm okay. And now you say, look at, we got, which ones should we do? Because we can't do them all. Now you pick them, and everybody picks them. And now you start forming teams of people to solve this one or solve that one. So the critical, once you got that far, you have really made a huge dent for people where they've been listened to, they've diverted, they cut. But you see, you're using a process. It's a process. And if you look at, you talk about the Stoics, is that the way you pronounce it? Stoics? Well, the only thing that's missing from there is a deliberate change. They don't have deliberate change. They got everything about being good, but the key is what's missing is you want to do something different. That's called deliberate change, problem finding, and that's basically what Seth Godin says. Totally, you've got to be different. And one of the people in my life that I learned so much for was a guy named Jim O'Neill. He was the head of a very high vice president level. He brought in our process at Frito-Lay to make a huge change to the way the company worked. And he took a risk. He took a risk, and when we described what we wanted to do, he said, "I do. Now we got to give it to the rest of the vice presidents, and they'll agree." And so we had a 2-hour session where we would present our plan to use the process. They said somebody was up with Jim on the elevator coming up. He said, Jim the sweat was coming out of me. He was so worried. Here's a guy who wants to bring in creativity into a company. He's going to be laughed at. He's going to be totally laughed. But he took the risk. And when I engaged the people in what it was, I said, you got some people who are enjoying themselves. We could do this, we do that. And we shut the door, got some nails on it, and got the thing going. But it's taking that risk. And he mentions banks as a real problem. In Canada, especially, banks are the most conservative people in the world. And they all the head wants to make his numbers. He just wants, I'll make my numbers. If they're good, I'll keep on going. But nobody wants to take a risk. And if you want to show leadership, like get into something else, now, if it fails, oh my goodness, so they keep it down. So a biggest problem in leadership is problem finding, willing to think of something new and take a risk because you're doing something different. And that's to me, that's the whole idea. The second idea, of course, is once you've said what I want to do, you've got to conceptualize it. So what happened to me was, I guess with my PhD, one of the things I had to go through was conceptualization, because when I had to come up with what is my problem, what am I actually research problem, that was conceptualization. And so I went through conceptualization there. And I was also, when George Gray, my chairman, said, here's what you got to do. I mean, I became an implementer big time. I did whatever you had to do to make his process, make his way of doing things work. And it came out okay. So I've tried with our taxonomy: generator, conceptualizer, optimizer, implementer. That's something that nobody is pigeonholed in any one of them. Everybody has some of everything. It's set up that way. So you could be biggest over here, and then less in other words. But a team, and I wrote I had an article, Harvard Business Review article we published last year. Said you need all 4 kinds of people if you're going to run a company properly. And so if you get a team to understand what the differences are, first of all, they are very happy to accept the differences. This is not personality. Nobody says, I don't like you because it's all okay. Everybody's okay. So now, on top of that, we have a method. It's 4 stages, either 8 steps or 4 stages. Generate, conceptualize, optimize, implement. What could be simpler? What could be simpler?
Right.
And then you go around again. But most people do not think of a process. To them, a process is a manufacturing thing where you do it. A process of thinking is very hard. I found through experience, it's very hard to accept. because everybody's got their own method of doing. But this says no,
Right.
it's disciplined creativity. Creativity is structured, very disciplined. If you keep
Mhm.
at it, you'll come up with something you didn't expect. So anyway, yeah. So a big thing about our profile is that you get your picture, and you look where other people's pictures are, and then you can say, why don't we start with generation? Why don't so if I'm generating and somebody else is optimizing, stop. Let's go. Oh, I get it. You're this and I'm that. We are able to correct ourselves and stay with the process wherever we are. So we a lot of our teaching is teaching people how to behave that way. How do you? So for me, organizational behavior boils down to learning how to solve problems. Uh, all behavior you do is kind of built on your problem solving. So I covered some more things, I guess, that you asked about. But I guess the biggest thing is don't solve problems for somebody for if you don't know who it's for. You have to have someone who wants it, and that's where empathy comes in. See, when you start helping a group of people, and you say, "Okay, let's get some facts out here," and you listen to them, that's empathy. Okay, let's turn these into some challenges. That's empathy because you're asking them to diverge and converse together. So you don't say, let me give you a lecture on empathy. No, they learn empathy by doing the problem
I do.
solving, and
Right.
you are making it so simple for them, and that they appreciate that, and that's where you're showing the empathy. So every time you diverge and converge through this 8-step process, empathy all the way. We open it up, we close it down, and you guys are in charge. Yeah, the owner and the group he's chosen are in charge, not you. You learned how to facilitate a meeting, and they make the decisions. And usually they end up somewhere that they didn't expect. Almost whenever they do challenge mapping, 99 times they end up with a different problem than they thought they had. And it's either more up or more down or somewhere in between. Once in a blue moon, they get the one they started with, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But often they get different ones.
I really appreciate the process, and I like how you describe disciplined creativity because I think, especially in academia, your goal is to try and remain objective in your approach. But I do think that creativity and problem solving, I mean, you can't get rid of bias and you can't get rid of, how you envision a solution working. And I think for people who, like myself, I'm eternally optimistic. Sometimes it's my demise. Um, but those processes help me cling to a structure versus how I might idealize something that may not be realistic. And I think I'm probably more of a conceptualizer than any of the others. But because I had a boss one time that described her ability to direct and to recognize patterns and to help people is because she sat in all of their seats before as
Yeah,
a leader. And so as somebody who, you kind of organically rise through the ranks in your career, but I have been an implementer and I'm still an implementer. I have that implementer mindset. Sometimes I can be an optimizer. Most of the time I'm better at conceptualizing things and
yeah,
understanding how things work.
yeah,
The idea generators, I think sometimes, the default is that you assume that those people they wake up and they're born creative and they come up with these ideas, but most of the time it's because they're really good at articulating the problem and being able to empathize with the implementers who are going to have to take that idea and hopefully put it into good work, so that you can come up with a better product or a better solution or a better plan for people. So I really love that the idea that this is just it's structured creativity or disciplined
yeah,
creativity.
yeah. We also called it creativity engineering.
Yeah,
Whatever will sell for people to, but it is a very disciplined process. And a thought came into my mind while you were talking. The darn thing has just gone out, and it had to do with the structure. Um, so have yeah no I forget what I was going to say. Yeah, it had to do with going through the wheel and you have people in that room, everybody. So if you're a generator, well, that's fine. Now, when we move to conceptualize it, we all move together. We do conceptualization
Right.
together, and then we do this together, and and yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, my entire life in academia was totally doing real what do you call it? The publications all came from the field. I was so fortunate that I had people to work with, and so now that this thing came in and came out again, yeah, no, darn it! If I should have grabbed it while it was there. Now it's disappeared on me. Oh yeah, if you're stuck in a situation where there's rules and regulations, like most people are in most companies, that's okay. The rules and regulations are there probably to help you.
Right.
And if you do a good job, you can use those regulations to help you, or you can find ways to get around them if you like. At P&G, they used to call it grandfather has all these rules, but we down here, grandfather Procter and Gamble, we down here kind of know how to stay in bounds and solve them. And no, I'm just not sure what it was that I was going to do. So really, what the biggest thing I did academically is I took Sid Parnes's not just ideas, but he did publish some things where he proved that deferral of judgment would work. And so I took that. And for me, if you had to figure, you had to say one thing that you needed to be able to do to be great is deferral of judgment. That is the classic. You have to be, and I've shown this in. I published a research that said that it is the number one thing. If you can learn how to defer judgment, that really means keeping an open mind. That's what it means. So you defer judgment on what is the problem. Defer judgment on is that a fact or not? And by the way, we say emotions are facts. Emotions are critical facts that many people are afraid to even say. They're even afraid to say, I don't know this. You got to be able to say it. You've got to have people who are willing to say, I don't know such and such, and be safe enough that it's okay to say it. So using this process also builds a safe environment. Everything's okay. When we diverge, everything's okay. And when we converge, everything's okay. But the other word is the word simple. When I left Procter and Gamble, I had to give my methodology a name. And I brainstormed a whole lot of words, and a key word I came up with, what do I teach, was simple. Trying to teach people to think simple and to talk simple. You can't solve problems if you don't know what the other guy is saying. So I named my center, the Center for Research in Applied Creativity, and we called the brand Simplex. And now we graduated to Simplexity, but the same idea. What I said was, when I went out, I said, listen, most people think that creativity is some kind of fun and games, but it's not. So I put the word applied in there, applied research. And then I said, I don't want to be a consultant, run around, knock on doors. I want to do research. And I want to do some good research so that whatever I do is backed by science. Our profile is totally scientific. It's built on. I was fortunate enough to meet with J.P. Guilford while I was visiting Sid, and he is a giant of a man. Who he started the research on innovation and creativity, but he also created the structure of intellect model. And he said IQ doesn't mean much, but he said basically there were 120 different kinds of thinking. For example, I could be divergent on words. You could be divergent on numbers. We slice it up in many different ways. So 120 of them. And he had 5 mental operations that just fitted me perfectly. The operation one was memory. Put that aside. One was one was the ability. One was learning by doing. Like when you're a kid, you learn by doing. You touch the stove. So he called that cognition. It's learning by doing. The other kind is what you learn at school, where they give you problems you must solve by analytical. So another kind of skill would be learning by abstract thinking. Then another operation was um, um, making judgments, evaluation. That's one. And then there was one's called divergent thinking. Okay, so I looked at that and wow, you've got the whole world right there. So you got two opposites: learning by doing and learning by analytical, and they're both important. And then you got ideating on one side and evaluating on the other, and they're both important. There is the profile. And it's built on exact science. That was exact. And everything we've done all kinds of, it is so accurate. It's remarkable. It's darn accurate. And people say, I don't know how you got that. Well, I worked very hard to get the words in our document that supported those 4 mental. I worked very hard. And we're on our 5th version of the profile. I tried it out at first. It had some face validity, and then we made improvements to the words as we went. And so I've done quite a few publications on making it a higher and higher Cronbach alpha and that kind of thing, and improve it. So we're very confident when we use it. It's built on science, and it's been researched to prove on science, improve by science. So I don't know whether I covered what I forgot there. I have no idea.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, a little bit of that was when you asked about. I guess you said the being rigid in hierarchy, accompanied by traditionalist approaches and rigid ideas about hierarchy. I think I know what you meant by that, but I'm not sure. What do you mean?
I would say like your experience where you creatively found ways to work within academia differently is probably what I mean. I feel like now, so I recently decided to go back to school and get my PhD after being out for 12 years. And most of what I don't think I would have been ready to continue in school had I just gone straight through. And most of the people that are in academia and at A&M never went anywhere else. They never worked in any other field. And it's becoming more and more common, I think, to find that you either stay in and you continue from undergrad till you get your PhD and then you go tenure track, or you leave and you don't return. And so I always have one foot in and one foot out. I think I love learning. I think that I hate to think of all the years that went on that I was not continuing or pursuing taking other courses consistently, because I love being in school again. I love the courses that I'm taking. It's just so enriching, I guess, for me as a person. And I'm able to apply a lot of those things in my day job, working at the Institute. But there are very few people that I'm in school with that are doing that same thing. So you kind of, I have to stay a little bit detached from people who are traditional academia and the way that they think and approach things. And I think that for the most part, when I have a new idea or I'm trying to solve something, the approach that I want to take is just a little bit too far outside of those traditional ideas in academia.
Yeah. You caught me. The key is wherever you are, you've got to show that you're valuable. That's so key. at Procter and Gamble, the most conservative company you'd ever want to meet in your whole life. You know, the rules. But I was able to fashion a career for myself by being valuable. And I said, whatever the guy's doing, yeah, he is valuable, and we'll let him. And I found that out. The other thing is having an arena in which you can do your thing. And if you've got an arena that you can, that's pretty darn good. And, you know, it allows me to do this with the Department of Defense or whatever. That's pretty darn good. So don't jump from one arena into nothing, but stay with that arena. And the other thing, if you don't know what you're doing, get more education. You know, that's happening. You know, I in my early days at P&G, I said, I think I'll get an MBA. And I explored, would you guys pay me to, or send me to a law school so I could come back and be in the legal department because I'd make more money. And they said, yeah, well, listen, if you go over there and night times you go this and that, we'd probably put you in. And well, in Canada, it was difficult to get an MBA. Here we can do it night time. Well, we'll let you do that if you want. Well, I discovered if I became a lawyer, I would have to give up my Canadian citizenship. I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I took the other. I got the MBA, but that opened all of a sudden you're mixing with all kinds of people that you didn't know about, you know, and you learn so much from them. So if you're kind of, they're mostly like me. If you're not sure what you do, get more education. Always do that. And so that's a good thing when you hit a hiatus. You never know what you'll bump into. But a key one is, you got to make yourself useful. Yeah. So if you're in this rigid hierarchy, you know, one thing I did in my university was problem solving is the worst you could ever see among a faculty group. You put a bunch of faculty people together, and they are cat and dog protecting their environment.
Yes.
And it's just, and they negate everybody. And I'm listening here, and I learned a way that I could start maybe facilitating the thing. It's called facilitating from the chair. You don't take over, but you say, well, you know, I'd like to hear more about that idea, or something else to help them out. And we get there a little bit faster after that. So even doing that kind of thing makes you valuable. They see what you're doing, and they recognize that, oh, there's something different going on here. So that's another thing I learned. You can always, if you've got the process with you, you can, it's like a bulletproof shield. No matter what happens, you got it for, so what do I do? Step one, fuzzy situation. Step two, get some facts. Step three, find some challenges for yourself. So don't expect that, in the engineering education, one of the problems we've got in engineering is people are taught 4 or 5 major problems they can solve, and they go out. Well, the world isn't made up of any of those 4. So when it comes to one that doesn't fit, they don't know what to do.
Right.
So what basically I teach is there's a process, structured process that can help you handle anything. But they're so used to, it's even worse than when I was in. They're very much, and I guess things are getting to the point where maybe turn them out faster or whatever is happening. But the process is really critical, that I can handle anything. It doesn't matter what it is. I have a way, whatever it is, that becomes the fuzzy situation, whatever it is. And I go down to fact find. And you can't go wrong if you're in fact finding. You'll discover things that you didn't know, and things will open up for you. We have, in my little company, we've developed, we're so focused on process. We've developed some things that can be done over the internet. You don't have to come in. And one of them is called the 10-minute problem solver. We have this this device on learning management system. Any problem you've got, if you got 10 minutes, you'll get something. Then we've got something called the 1-hour problem solver. If you got a more difficult problem, here's the steps, follow them through, you'll get somewhere. Then we got one that's called 1-hour problem solver for complex problems, where we bring in challenge mapping. You can buy that one. If you really want to get serious, we have a 3-hour program that you can buy. It's called a Guide to Becoming a Better Innovator, and you get everything, the whole process from beginning to end, and you can learn the process. Like, of course, learning it, you're just learning it. You're not learning it by doing. You're just watching it. So we have those 4 items that we. The nice thing about the internet is that we have 8 billion customers, rather than yeah. So if we can get some people to simply say, "I get it, I get it," we got this little process, and so that's something we are taking advantage of. Uh, oh, and when you mentioned having different people from different walks of life, it's really, if you're doing this on Zoom, you can the walks of life to the end. You can bring them all. Pick out people from the Middle East and South America and whatever you need, but get the right people in the room somehow. That's the key. Who can do something to help and select them. So that was another thing that you had mentioned, which is the problem is you'd rather have people in the room if at all possible. This has to do it. People are resisting going back to work. Well, you got to go back to work. You got to be there. If you want to solve problems, you're there. And the only time you use a Zoom is like if you already know what you're doing and just got a checklist of stuff. But when you're together talking, all things start popping out from here, there, and everywhere. You can't beat being together. And it's hard, but if at all possible, well, in companies, you can just tell people to come on in, and suffer the groaning and moaning. But
Yeah.
if you want people to think, you got to do it together. If you want them just take orders, just tell them on Zoom but you won't engage people. That's the other thing, engagement. People are talking about, well, we got to get our engagement scores up. We employee engagement, we got to meet our numbers. So they figure out how to get more people to come to problem solving. But the idea is how do you engage them, not how do you run your score up. What are you doing to engage people? Are you training your people to engage? And so there's a big difference about getting a score on your engagement scores by running a survey, or you have it by getting people to learn how to engage people in their problem solving and whatever they're doing. And people love to be engaged. That's the other thing. We just wrote a blog. I don't know if you tune into our blogs, but this one was called "People Do Not Resist Change. They Do Resist Being Changed." And I know that because in 1948, there was a study done on exactly this. It was done with miners or whatever. And the big difference was that if you involve people in the change, it's the difference between change making and you can make change the proper way, where you engage people to actually make the change, or you can shove it down their throats by saying you're going to do some training,
Right.
and we're going to make you fold your arms and do all kinds of exercises to help you accept. So that's called managing change. We have to do it to them versus involve them for change making. And usually the change you're making is going to be even better than you envision if you engage your people in making the change. So that's a big thing. And it's all done with the process. The process starts with problem finding, fact finding, problem definition. That's how you engage people. And so if there's a change you got in your mind, that becomes your fuzzy situation. And then you bring in a team of people who do fact finding around it. And then we do a challenge map, and you find out much better what am I really trying to do as opposed to just make change.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I have a whole nother brain of perspective from our conversation. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the perspectives and your openness and willing to go through these crazy questions.
Right up my alley. I said, oh boy, is this good? I got all the stuff in front of me.
Well,
All kinds of connections.
that's
Yeah.
cool. I really enjoyed reading through some of your background and getting to know more about the company that you've built. Um, and really enjoyed listening to the way that you categorize certain I would say initiatives and the way that you think, I think is really creative and it's refreshing, I think, to be able to both be an evaluator and somebody who's creative in a structured way. Uh, so that was huge to get to hear some of the way that you think for me today. Um, I know that Dr. Ramos says I think I'm supposed to write up some kind of like reflection based on this, but I would love to share that with you if you have the time to read through that. But I've learned so much just in the last couple of weeks learning about your background. So I appreciate you spending the time with me today.
What you asked here was very insightful. That you were asking the first, you want to know about myself. How did I get started?
Mhm.
So that was really refreshing. And said, okay, all right. So I go back and do all that. That was really good. And you were interested the process that I went through,
Mhm.
as opposed to the content that I came up with, and that's so critical. The ability to separate process from content. And the more a person becomes kind of a process person, you can manage so many things so well by staying out of the content until you're ready. We have this new rule called rule number one is give credit for thinking first. So if you're a manager and your employee comes up with something on their mind, it could be first thing you do is say, "Thank you for thinking. I like the fact that you're thinking." That's to give them credit for thinking. Now that's process. And then you can get into tell me more about it, or you get into the content together. But you're a process first, and then you can get into content as you go. So that was critical. So you were asking really my whole process of how this all happened. So it gave me a chance to really think it through and make the connections and stuff like that. So really, now if you do any kind of a summary, I would love to see it.
Okay.
And of course, we'll have the recording, which will be useful. And so a big thanks to you.
No, thank you. I mean, I was very surprised that I can't remember if I ever saw a comprehensive list of folks that Dr. Ramos has created relationships with for people to talk to, but I know that there's a lot of demand on your time, or I assume that there is. So I really appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions and to help me process kind of the journey that you've been on. I can find a lot about the content that you've created, but I couldn't find a whole lot about kind of how your mind walked through
Yeah,
some of
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. That's very good. Yeah, very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure where Louise is, if he's still on with us, or if he's going to keep the call open. But do you have any other insights or last minute questions for me?
Yeah. What is your job right now? What is your official job?
So I focus on, so I work for the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, and I'm more in the communication.
Is this part of the university or not?
It is,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Because I yeah, I have a very long history with Texas A&M.
yeah.
I guess you know that. We used to come down and do sessions.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And the pandemic has kind of blurred everything, but yeah. So are you
Yep.
part of the university?
Yes. So our institute is kind of like it's a research institute connected with the university,
Yeah,
but because we are soft funded, we are able to kind of facilitate really cool experiences for students in different departments. Most of those students by default are in the ag college because
yeah,
we're in natural resources.
yeah,
Um, but I'm starting to see this need for a more of a crossover with students in the real estate center and students in engineering and city planning and like parks and recreation, especially in Texas because our population is growing. There's a higher demand on land. We're losing a lot of our land is being converted for development. And of course, there's a cascade of of effects that happen when you start losing those opportunities for open space land, whether it's for ecosystem services and health or ag commodities, those kinds of things. So the Institute's role as a soft funded institute is to make sure that we're telling the story, the data story behind what's happening in Texas as far as our land conversion, loss of ag land, loss of family farms and ranches. We also work with the Department of Defense to make sure that the land that they have is being stewarded correctly. We work a lot with the Endangered Species Act. So we have traditional wildlife biologists and scientists who work on endangered species within the Institute. And some of them also have teaching roles within some of the departments. Um, so my role within the Institute is more communications and partnerships. And then I also teach a course on communications in the College of Ag. So we're kind of hybrids in a way because we have these soft funded contracts that pay our salaries, but then we also teach and we're able to bring those experiences that are happening in real life and in the field into the classrooms so that students have a better understanding of what's happening in natural resources.
Sounds like you have an awful lot of opportunity for problem solving.
Yeah, I
As
think
long
so.
as you can, as long as you can enjoy that,
Yeah.
that you're very lucky. You're very lucky because a lot of people are in jobs where they're not happy or they don't not their structure. They don't. And to be able to say I have got an arena that I like working in and is funded, and I can do that. That's a pretty nice thing. Um, the idea is that you might think about where this might lead to. Is it going anywhere, or if am I happy if I just keep on doing what I'm doing? But you might, yeah, I guess you might be thinking of maybe somebody else facilitating for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are there any things you're not pleased about or whatever it is? But by doing by doing that, if you uncover some things that are not ideal, you could start working on them somehow, as opposed to the one that says get more education,
Right.
which is okay if you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
and but by doing more education, you always find out things you didn't know. But the main thing I think is keep it experiential. You're experiencing all this stuff. You're learning by experience about yourself. Um, And if you keep on doing those kinds of things, you'll learn maybe some things you didn't know about yourself. Yeah, the more you expose different bunches of people, real estate versus this, and there are connections. So they may not. I
Right.
think I've been taught by a mentor that the biggest thing in cities this day are like things like water, uh, land, whatever the next one is, electricity, and the other one is connectivity. Nobody
Right.
knows how to connect things.
Yeah.
Nobody's, and especially evident in a city like Toronto. You've got people who will be digging ditches over here, unaware that they're blocking traffic for people who are doing this over there. They're not connected,
Right.
and everybody's in their little fiefdom. And the biggest problem is to build connectivity somehow, and that would be, and I'm sure in your case as well, there are a lot of people who think I just do real estate, as opposed to knowing that it's connected to something else. So that's one that you could, take leadership on is building connectivity. And they say, wow, that person's really smart. She likes to build connectivity. I wonder what she means by that. But you'd have to find somebody who was interested. You got
Mhm.
to get a city manager or someone like that who says, I'd like to do that. And yeah.
One of the things that I'm starting to discover or that's coming up more and more is this idea of place-based learning and how you can kind of lean into the people whose identities are rooted in where they are and
Yeah.
how those people want to become better stewards of their little domains, their areas. Um, And that's kind of been an interesting thing to explore is thinking about ways that you can activate people to steward things in a different way because they care about them in a different way. It's not coming from a city planning standpoint, but more from a community level standpoint and what that looks like on an operationalized level. So it's kind of, it's a weird idea to think about operationalizing the philosophy of place-based learning or place-based stewardship. So those are things that I feel like keep coming up as I'm continuing to do things that are completely unrelated. So those are things that I'm exploring is just thinking about what activates people to think differently and kind of to your point, people resist being changed, but they are okay with change as long as there's buy-in, as long as they understand what their value is in those situations and why it matters to them and what that there's a little bit of, the ethic that's involved in that. So there are a lot
Yeah.
of layers to some of
What
these
what
things.
one of the key things that Seth Godin said is, "Who can we help?
Yeah,
Who can we help?" And I got to, do we have any customers that who we like out there? Are there people with problems that we could help solve if they're their problems?
right.
And so, who can we help is critical, and that's what gets that gets the uh, whole thing going. If and he talks about advertising, that kind of stuff. And never mind pulling off the greatest thing in the world that would sell Pampers. Is who are we trying to help?
Right.
What is their problem? And build your campaign on that. So maybe that's a big one for you. And if faith-based stuff is finished, are these people interested in helping other people? Who would
Right.
they like to help? Well, they might say we don't want to help anybody. Okay, well, you're not going to be able to do much for them, but you might lead them. You might lead them some for some problem finding. Okay, let's do some finding. Who might who? What are some problems people have that we might be able to help them with? All of a sudden, the list gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you can say, could we pick one here that's really a good customer, somebody that you
Mhm.
really could help, and you've got things started. Once you start diverging, funny things happen. One leads to another. But you would be very popular if you had some people who felt they didn't want to do anything, and you had one of those sessions with them, and they suddenly decided, yeah, we could do some. Unlike what do they call the Stoics, who had
Mhm.
everything set. Do you want to make? Do you want to do some? Do you want to make a change? Who could you help? That's key.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that did you, I think have you read anything from Seth Godin?
No, I never heard of it. You know something? I'm
I
so
hadn't
busy.
either. I
I'm so
hadn't either.
busy. And one good thing was I learned about these people and I looked them up, and it came out to be exactly the same old thing. You got to be
Yes.
different if you're going to stand out. You got to
Yes.
do something good. You got to find a good problem. Who's the customer? I wrote those things out,
Yeah.
and you've got to be thinking of who's the customer. And I think 90. Now I know when we done an awful lot of research, like thousands of people, and we wrote it up in that HBR article. Is that the smallest? If you take the four styles: generator, conceptualizer, optimizer, implementer, no matter what the level of the company, generators are the smallest. Only 16% of the people are generators based on our research. And that means the senior people are no better than the junior people down here in coming up with new things, generation. So that's something to think about. And if you're going to go and get ahead, whether you're a generator or not, you need to do some generator work, finding new problems to do it. That's critical. And that's always, do we have a problem in the company that nobody wants to touch? Maybe that's the one you want to grab and bring
Right.
it up. Or if you can find a new way of thinking that is brand new, okay, but you have to be stand up and be ready for a lot of criticism, and that they have.
Yeah, it reminds me of, um, the age-old, SWOT analysis.
Yeah,
You're
that's
right.
good. That's good. That's good fact finding.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh, we do strategic planning. What? The SWOT analysis. Well, that's just a piece of facts.
right.
Lots of other facts that you could gather, and but then after you get all those facts down, you can start picking out which are key to you. But it's a great way to. Excuse me.
Let's
It's a great tool. SWOT would be called a tool. It's a fact finding tool. And you could use all kinds of tools for gathering facts. And that's something that you as a facilitator might make sure we got lots of fact finding things. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to distinguish between tools and processes. A
Mhm.
process is something you do, but you need tools to make things happen. And brainstorming, for example, is a tool. It's a simple tool. A tool of what? It's a tool of divergent thinking, which is a skill. It's a skill of. It also helps defer judgment, but it's a tool. But what we're trying to do is divergent thinking, deferral of judgment. So there are many tools. So if you say we're doing Six Sigma at our plant, that's a tool. First of all, you have to uncover what problem you're trying to solve, and it could be a tool, but it could be lots of other tools. Or we're a lean. We do lean. They try to fight over lean versus the other. They're both tools, but what you got to do is define the problem first, and you may find a solution that is neither one of those if you define the problem first.
Mhm.
What is this process really trying to do? And you might find a more efficient, innovative solution than either Six Sigma. But to just decide that everything is Six Sigma, again, that's the whole thing about everything looks like an attack if all you got is a hammer. And you try to get people to open up before that. Those are solutions. Those are steps 4 and 5. The thing to do is steps 1, 2, and 3 to be a good thinker.
I like that.
Do you think we might be finished?
Yeah.
I do have some other things to take.
Okay. I appreciate you taking the time to brainstorm with me and to kind of walk me through some of your processes. This was really fruitful for me.
Yeah, so if I could get a summary of what we did, or well, we'll get the whole thing. That'll be very useful.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, have a good rest of your afternoon. I hope the weather is nicer there than it is in Texas.
Oh yeah, yeah, or in Florida.
Yeah, or Florida.
Yeah,
Yes. I
and thanks
appreciate your
thanks for
time.
Louise being very patient.